Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Danielle, for inviting me and for that beautiful introduction. And thank you, Frank, for inviting me and helping me get here and for calming my nerves. I really appreciate it. The morning has been amazing. It's such an inspiration to listen to these panels and to hear all the wonderful progress that's been made since I was a victim of non-consensual pornography and had absolutely no one and nothing to advocate for me. So I'd like to share my personal story and just kind of talk a little bit about the changes that have been made here in Maryland and in the state and what we're hoping for to see happen federally. So, excuse me. So it was only in hindsight that I saw that there was nothing typical about my relationship with Joey. And that's not his real name, by the way. He never picked me up at my house for a date. He never joined my family for a meal. He never hung out with my friends, stopped by to see me at work, took me to a restaurant, or spoke to my brother. But still, I was drawn into his orbit. His charm and musical talent pulled me in, kept me by his side, and almost made me his bride. Less than a year after we started dating in 1989, we set up house in a tiny attic apartment. Barely 6 months after we moved into the attic, I was fired from my job and forced to move home. Joey said I abandoned him and stopped returning my calls. 2 months of silence was the impetus I needed to leave New Jersey and move to North Carolina to attend college. I left a note on Joey's car the night before I left. For months, he refused to accept my long-distance phone calls and scrawled "return to sender" on the envelopes of the letters I sent him. It was 1990, long before the internet took hold and shook up communications and relationships as we knew them. Fast forward 19 years to May of 2009. I was living in Maryland, a college English professor, married and the mother of 2 children. It wasn't a happy marriage. We each had a foot out the door. That June, I received a friend request on Facebook from Joey. Within a month, my marriage ended, I visited Joey twice, and we picked up where we left off. It was a true love returned Disney fantasy. Joey focused his attention on me with laser beam intensity. He lived 3 hours away in northern New Jersey, so I attributed his questioning about what I was wearing, where I was going, and whom I would be with to the strains of a long-distance relationship. I accounted for my wardrobe, my whereabouts, and friends dutifully. I wanted to please him. During what would be Joey's last visit to Maryland in February 2010, we had a fight over a skirt I wore to work. He deemed my skirt too short and called me a hooker. He lectured me about my transgressions. I married someone else. I had male friends who I was sleeping with. I had sex with other men in the 19 years we were apart. It was a lecture I'd been hearing frequently during our phone calls. I would roll my eyes while I silently recited some of the sentences along with him. But seeing him give the lecture, how his face turned red and his fists clenched, I knew this was a dangerous man. I told him to pack his things and I drove him back to New Jersey. We were over. The next night, Joey called me at 11:53 p.m. He was livid. From looking at my Facebook page, he shouted through the phone, it was clear that I was sleeping with at least 3 other guys. I tried to rationalize with him, to convince him he was mistaken, but he was too far gone to hear me. He threatened to start an eBay auction. He said he was going to auction off a CD of 88 images of me, most of them nude images. I had allowed him to take these over the previous 4 months and swore him to secrecy. He said he would send links to the auction to my friends and family, to people at the college where I teach. I shook with desperate fear because I knew no words would change his mind. Joey had flown into a rage, uncontrollable and impervious to reason. He laid out my fate. I pleaded for him not to carry out his threat. He replied, "I will destroy you," and he hung up the phone. I needed help. I called the Baltimore County Police and tried to explain what was happening. The dispatcher, confused, sent an officer to my house. The officer was a tall man who looked down on me as I told my story. It was the first of many times I would be told, condescendingly, "There's nothing I can do. No crime has been committed." And at that point, no crime had been committed. I was frantic over a threat, which to the board officer was nothing to worry about. To me, it was a portent of the misery that I would soon suffer. The auction went live the following afternoon. I received about 3 emails from eBay informing me that Joseph Mann thought you might like this item on eBay. The link to the auction read, name of my college redacted, English professor, nude photos, woohoo! The main photo was of me, topless. I gagged and ran to the kitchen sink. Then I shifted into damage control mode. I had to stop this. Joey and I were still Facebook friends, so I received alerts in my newsfeed that he had posted links to the auction on 5 of the college's Facebook pages. I sent messages to the page's administrators, who were my chairs and deans, explaining what was happening. I would learn in the weeks to come that a few students and at least 3 male colleagues followed the links, logged into eBay, and saw the auction. Saw me naked. More emails arrived from friends, my ex-husband, my babysitter. They had received the same messages from eBay and were concerned. I reported Joey for abuse on Yahoo. I reported his Facebook page. I contacted eBay and told them about the auction. They quickly took it down, but within an hour, Joey created another account and posted the auction again. For 48 hours, I played cat and mouse, finding new auctions he created with new usernames and reporting them to eBay. I went to the police with an envelope full of printed evidence, screenshots of the eBay auctions, emails, Facebook pages that I was sure would convince them that I was in danger. Again, an officer looked down on me and said, "Nothing we can do, no crime here." I drove across town to another police precinct. I handed over my envelope and stood there, pretending to be brave, while 3 officers looked over the auction photos and snickered. The blonde one smirked as he walked towards me with my envelope. I didn't hear what he said. It was my first experience with victim blaming. And because it came from someone charged to protect and serve, my shame and embarrassment flew to a paralyzing level. After 4 days, the auction finally stopped appearing and the Facebook alerts ended. The storm had passed. For the following 14 months, I would wake in a panic at 3 a.m. and check my 3 email accounts, my Facebook page, the college's 8 Facebook pages, search my name in the adults-only section of eBay, search all the eBay usernames Joey used, then finish with a Google search of my name. I performed my 3 a.m. ritual 3 times before my heart would slow down, but I still couldn't get back to sleep. In September of 2011, I received an anonymous email on my work account. It said there was a profile of me on a porn website that featured nude pictures of me. I closed my office door, Googled my name, and the porn website X-Hamster popped up. And there I was. The profile included my full name, the city and state where I live, the college and campus where I teach, and a solicitation for sex. Hot for teacher? We'll come get it. The site had been up for 14 days and it had been viewed 4,000 times. There were friends who were commenting on my pictures. He was chatting with these people as if he were me. My stomach hurt as I held my breath and printed 23 pages of vile and violent comments. I snatched the pages from the printer and left campus to again seek help from the police. When I arrived at the police station in my district, I was greeted by the same officer from last year. Again, he looked down on me and he said, annoyed, "There is nothing we can do. No crime has been committed." I tried to explain to this cop that I was in danger of being stalked in real life. My name was on that site, where I live, where I work. He said, "If anything happens, call us. Then we'll do something." I sped home, closed all the curtains, and called the Maryland State Police and the Baltimore Division of the FBI. I left messages explaining what happened. When the kind FBI agent returned my calls, she informed me that they couldn't do anything unless he issued a death threat. So it became a joke among my friends and family, "Wishing you a death threat today. Hope today is your death threat day." We were surviving on gallows humor. Another 48 hours were spent engrossed in damage control. I had a session with my therapist scheduled that afternoon, but I couldn't make myself step out my front door. I called her and we had a phone session. After we hung up, she faxed a letter to the college informing them that I needed to go on immediate medical leave. I was afraid to leave my house and couldn't imagine standing in front of a room full of students. A senior administrator at the college denied my request for medical leave, insisting I perpetrated the incident. It was humiliating. I feared for my job. As the days passed, I recognized the permanence of the internet. I knew his torture was never going to end. As long as he had those images, he was in control of my life. So I decided to end my life. And I would have been successful if it weren't for three things. My dog needed to pee, so I had to stop what I was doing, or else she would have ruined my hardwood floors. My mom called, so I had to answer the phone. And the pills I was taking weren't fatal. Surviving the suicide attempt was not the turning point that pushed me into action. It was a conversation with a state trooper who was assigned to my case the following week. He gently explained the Maryland laws and the limits of those laws. I was frustrated. And when he finished, I announced, well, then I'm going to change the laws. He replied, Annmarie, if you can do that, it would make my job a lot easier. So I set out to keep my word. On February 2nd, 2012, 5 months after seeing myself on X-Hamster, I testified before the Maryland Senate Judicial Committee in support of a bill that amended Maryland's misuse of electronic mail statute to include all forms of electronic communication. The bill was passed and the law was amended. It was a step forward, but a very small one. I then began volunteering with the End Revenge Porn campaign that would grow into the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative. I served as a victim advocate, then the director of victim services. In my years with CCRI, I assisted over 2,000 victims of non-consensual pornography. My goal with CCRI was to be the person I didn't have when I was victimized, to be the support, the comfort, the resource, the one with the answers. My opportunity to help even more people came in February of 2012 when I and Danielle Citron put together a bill, and I was invited to testify before the Maryland House Judicial Committee in support of a bill that would criminalize non-consensual pornography. The bill was passed into law that April. The following year, I would find myself again testifying before a Senate committee, this time with Mary Ann Franks. Only that time I was in Washington, D.C., and again, the bill was passed into law. My ordeal was horrifying, but it wasn't just the invasion of my privacy that made it so. It was the blame that I at first put on myself, but then the blame that others put on me. I was hearing, if you never let him take the pictures, this never would have happened, when I should have been hearing, if he never posted those pictures, betrayed your trust, and acted maliciously, this never would have happened. It was the quiet threat from that senior administrator that my victimization put my career as a college professor in jeopardy. It was the deluge of rape and death threats I received after I went public with my story, and still receive when I publish an essay or participate in an interview. It was the apathy from the police, save for that one state trooper who showed true compassion. It was the failure of the New Jersey State Police to do their jobs, because if they had done a little research, they would have learned that invasion of privacy is a felony in New Jersey, where my perpetrator lived. My friend, fellow victim, and former CCRI Assistant Victim Services Director Anisha Vora was able to see her ex receive a felony conviction under New Jersey's law only a couple years after my ordeal. In retrospect, however, I was lucky. My exposure was minimal. Anisha and hundreds of other women with whom I worked had their images posted on at least 2,000 websites dedicated to revenge porn. In working with DMC Defender, a takedown service victims can use to have their images removed from these sites, we identified close to 4,000 websites dedicated to hosting revenge porn. These women on these sites have gone viral, and years after their initial exposure, after court cases, after lawsuits and settlements, these women remain on hundreds of sites. Another way in which I was lucky is that I was only confronted once offline. One of those male colleagues I mentioned earlier approached me on campus. He said something like, "I saw your auction," and I knew what he meant. I see him every day. I've had to decline invitations to serve on committees and participate in conferences in order to avoid his lascivious glances at my breasts. Anisha was confronted at the grocery store while she was shopping with her then 2-year-old stepson. She was also confronted in her home. One cold morning, she walked out to her driveway to start and warm up her car. She returned to her house to finish getting ready for work. When she turned down the hallway towards the front door to leave, there was a man in her house walking towards her. She ran out another door, jumped into her already running car, and drove to safety. You see, online abuse does not stay online. This is the true danger we victims face. The threats are frightening because they have been carried through. One victim I worked with had men coming to her house throughout the night for several days because her ex wrote under her nude pictures that her sexual fantasy is to be gang raped. And there were plenty of men happy to oblige that fantasy. She and her mother had to move to another state. I could report dozens of cases where women were confronted at school, work, in grocery stores, malls, at home, in Starbucks. All the places non-victims feel safe to frequent are sources of fear for us. The day I was posted on X-Hamster, my son had soccer practice. I stood there on the sidelines, looking at all the men around me and wondering who saw me on that site. Sweet relief came from my dear girlfriend, Megan, who, when I called her for support, said, "I know this is hard for you, but your landing strip is beautiful. How do you get such clean lines?" It felt good to laugh. Thank you.